call for zoning amendment bylaw 2014-11.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This hearing is a public hearing being held pursuant to Section 890 of the Local Government Act for the purpose of hearing representation from those persons who believe their interest in property may be affected. The bylaw on the agenda tonight is zoning bylaw number 2014-11. Notices of this public hearing have been duly advertised in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. Also, a copy of the bylaw and supporting documentation has been available for inspection at the City of Penticton Planning Department during normal working hours. The role of council is to hear representation from those persons who wish to provide comments regarding the proposed bylaws. Everyone who wishes to speak shall be given the opportunity to be heard. However, it is important that all who speak at this meeting restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw. Council's main function is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. No decisions will be made at the public hearing, but will be considered within a council meeting. It should be noted that after the public hearing has been concluded, council cannot hear from interested parties regarding the bylaw. The bylaw for consideration is zoning amendment bylaw 2014-11. The bylaw proposes to amend zoning bylaw 2011-23 as follows. Rezoning amending amended parcel A, see DD 235475F and 265841F of Lot 2, District Lot 116, Similkameen Division Yield District, Plan 5963, except Plan 38082, located at 3480 Skaha Lake Road from C8 Vehicle Service Station to C6 Mixed Use Commercial. The applicant is proposing to construct a commercial development. Since printing the public hearing package, we've received 2 positive letters in support of this from Brenda and Mauro Meneghetti and Gary and Janet Ward. The correspondence has been distributed to council for their information.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Going on to the Director of Development Services to describe the amendments.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick summary of the application that was presented for introduction last week. A couple of minor changes to the site plan that was originally shown to council. We've got one slide just showing the subject property, the proposed C6 zone, and the development that would subsequently be constructed. The single-story retail composed development and restaurant portion. The property, as you can see, is the corner of Scar Lake Road and Yorkton Avenue, building number 1, restaurant, coffee shop to be located on that corner, and then restaurant, retail, and office development located to the rear, with access both from Scar Lake Road and Yorkton Avenue. A couple of building elevations showing the design of the building down there, and west elevation, south elevation of the building to the rear of the property. And again, staff are recommending support to your worship. The proposal is in line with the city's official community plan, and the opportunity for the public to speak to council on this matter is now available.
Thank you, Mr. Haddad. Is the applicant in the gallery this evening? The applicant would like to come forward and make a presentation.
Good evening, members of council, Mayor Lickney. Just to briefly summarize.
Sorry, your name and address, please.
My name is Bill Vankaloof, part of Starline Enterprises. I live in Summerland. Other members of my family business live on Athens Creek, 2115 Atkinson Street.
Thank you.
Just a brief summary, and I'll answer some questions if there's any afterwards. Anthony explained everything quite well. Biggest reason why we bought this little piece of that property there is our family bought the remainder of that site, and we wanted to make sure that the corner there would sort of complement what we have envisioned for the back half, and so we wanted to make sure that we had something that looked kind of nice to complement ours and would actually be complementary for the city as well. In the more than 25 years that we've been developing properties in Penticton, we've seen nothing else, and service stations being closed down and ending up being vacant lots for 15, 20 years. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen another one where the old Decker can is now shut down too. And we went through all all the information on this particular one, and the Ministry of Environment had approved that we can proceed with what we've designed for, and they were very picky about what kind of buildings to be built, and they're also very picky about even like the kinds of trees and everything to get planted on it, so they're quite a bit of information and that we had to go through along with members of the planning staff. So thanks to a lot of help from, especially from Daryl Hadrow and planning, where he researched quite a bit about the Ministry of Environment about what we could do there. So we came to a solution, and with a little bit of give and take, I think we've got something that everybody could be proud of. So if there are any questions, I'll answer them, or
Great, thank you very much. So you'll, I'll go to council right now, but also at the conclusion of the public hearing, you'll have the last word as well, sir, after you've heard from any concerns that might be raised by the gallery. So first of all, to council, any questions? No? Okay, seeing none, then thank you very much. I'll go now to the gallery. Anyone in the gallery wishing to make a presentation with respect to this matter? This is at 3480 Squaw Lake Road. For the second time, anyone in the gallery wishing to come forward and make a presentation with respect to this application? And for the third and final time, oh, somebody getting up? No? Okay. For the third and final time, anyone wishing to come forward and make a presentation with respect to 3480 Squaw Lake Road? Seeing none, I will declare I'll give the applicant one last chance if there's anything you want to say in conclusion.
no, thank you very much.
Fine. Okay. And I will declare the public hearing terminated. Thank you very much. We'll go now to the regular council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. We do have 3 late items on the agenda. First of all, we have a recommendation from this afternoon's Committee of the Whole meeting, and that recommendation will appear as item 10.5 under Committee and Board Reports. It's a recommendation from this afternoon's Committee of the Whole. We have a letter from the Ministry of the Environment that's germane to item 6.2. It's some information that was received late Friday afternoon, so under item 6.2, before the delegation takes place, we'll share some information that we've just received from the Ministry of the Environment. And we have a funding request, which will be item 9.3 as a funding request from Apex regarding an event that they're holding soon. So with those 3 additions to the agenda, Council, I'll look for a motion to adopt that agenda as amended. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? We have an agenda. First item of business is adoption of the minutes. I'll call for a motion to receive the minutes of February 16th public hearing. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of receipt? Thank you. Item 4.2, minutes of February 17th, the regular council meeting. Motion to adopt. Moved and seconded. The discussion.
I would
Councilor
just
Sanders.
like to make a point, in the delegation, I'm sorry,
It's on.
oh, it's not, it's, they're looking after me. I would just request that under 6.4, under number 6 of delegation, 6.4, it references Tanya Bahardian, Penticton and District Resource Society. In fact, Tanya is the executive director, and I think it would be appropriate to have that designation in there. And the other point that I wondered about is on page 7. We moved the signing officers for the city of Penticton. And the bottom of page 7, it says, as signing officers for the calendar year ended December 31st, 2014, and subsequent years. This is an election year, so I just wondered about the appropriateness of going beyond December 31st, 2014. Or is that just... So thank you. So with that, with those amendments, I would be happy to go to...
All right, I'll call the question on adopting those minutes. All those in favor?
As amended.
As amended, yes.
Thank you.
All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Going now to presentations. So our presentations, we're going to ask that you keep your presentations down to 5 minutes, as you've been instructed by Ms. Schmidt when you applied for these presentations. So we do have 2 this evening. The first one is from Aaron Quast and Lana Barr regarding urban hemkeeping pilot project. So I'll ask them to come forward. You can either stand at the lectern, or you may sit at the desk, whichever is more comfortable for you.
Sit at the desk. I'll be reading from a PowerPoint.
All right, sounds good.
Hey, everyone,
Welcome.
thank you. Good to see you. All right. So I think everyone knows what we're here to do. We've met with most of you, and yeah, we're just looking to bring our Handkeeping pilot project back, or as maybe an alternative, just simply amending the bylaw. But I'm just gonna read through our presentation here, and I think we'll hopefully be within the 5 minutes. So I'm just gonna start with urban agriculture. Urban agriculture is the practice of cultivating, processing, and distributing food in and around our village, town, or city. Urban agriculture can also involve animal husbandry, agriculture, urban beekeeping, and horticulture. So the pros of urban agriculture now, well, obviously things like positive environmental impact, positive economic impact, better quality and nutrition, and positive social impact. Food security and sustainability. So this is probably our what I would consider the primary reason for wanting to consider something like this. So food security is on the decline in Canada, which means there's less food available to more families. Our current food system is not sustainable from an environmental, social, and economic perspective. An increase in the food security and sustainability within our community will strengthen our families and increase hardiness in the meantime lower in food prices. So access to nutrition, food, both economically and geographically, is another perspective in the effort to locate food and livestock productions in cities. With the tremendous influx of world population in urban areas, the need for fresh and safe food is increased. So the Community Food Security Coalition defines food security as all persons in a community having access to culturally acceptable, nutritionally adequate food through local, non-emergency sources at all times. Areas faced with food security issues have limited choices, often relying on highly processed fast food and convenience store foods that are high in calories and low in nutrition, or nutrients, which may lead to elevated rates of diet-related illnesses such as diabetes, and these problems have brought about the concept of food justice with Alcon and Norgard. It explains as places access to healthy, affordable, culturally appropriately food in the context of institutional racism, racial formation, and racialized geographies. So food justice serves as a theoretical and political bridge between scholarship and activism on sustainable agriculture, food insecurity, and environmental injustice. So why hens? Humans need complex proteins in their diet, and eggs literally are the most efficient source. Of course, fresh, healthy, delicious eggs, free of pesticides and antibiotics. Cruelty-free raised food. Chickens do eat table scraps, reducing municipal solid waste. Chickens produce a rich fertilizer byproduct, high in nitrogen, eliminating the need for petrochemical fertilizers. Chickens eat bugs, reducing our backyard pest population. Backyard chickens contribute to a zero-mile diet as they are as local as your backyard. Keeping chickens is an efficient food source, as eggs are rated by the UN Food and Agriculture as a more efficient source of protein than any other of the 4 top sources, higher in value than cow's milk, fish, beef, or soybeans. Chicken coop can be as small as 1 square meter, 10 square feet for a confined, full-grown group or large breed. 8 chickens can fit in a coop that is only 10 by 6. Keeping backyard chickens puts you in control of your own food source, and we can access eggs year-round, even when we cannot garden or in the event of disruptions in the commercial food delivery system. The UN FAO has stated that the right to food is a basic human right. Chickens make great pets. They are affectionate, intelligent, and entertaining. Anyone who's ever had them will know. Children and adults receive a rich education about food sources and responsible animal keeping when they keep livestock, and that teaches a positive relationship and respect for food. Knowledge and respect for food encourages healthy weight maintenance as well. Keeping backyard chickens is a historic tradition that has been recently phased out in favor of profit-driven commercial food delivery, and keeping livestock is a traditional and basic survival skill. Common knowledge of basic survival skills increases the recovery of our population after disaster. So that's why hens. So the cons of urban hen keeping. You can see this is a pretty short list. Yes, it can attract some predators, and it does require care and upkeep. But through the use of regulation, perhaps licensing, maybe monitoring, there are very few downsides to keeping a small flock of hens. So the other big topic here that I want to discuss is the myths of urban hen keeping. There's obviously a lot of people that are wary of this. So I'm going to address the 7 main concerns that are routinely surface when talking about chickens. Disease being one, noise, waste, odor, and flies, predators and rodents, property values, appearances, and of course what will the neighbors think. So let's take a look. So myth number 1, chickens carry diseases communicable to humans. So fact, the truth is that a small flock has literally no risk of avian flu transmission to humans. The 2006 grain report states, when it comes to bird flu, diverse small-scale poultry is the solution, not the problem. Centers of Disease Control states on their website there is no need at present to remove a family or flock of chickens because of concerns regarding avian flu. And avian flu has been in the press as a concern to commercial poultry production where birds are raised in monster-sized flocks, confined in overcrowded environments, and fed the cheapest food possible. This causes high stress and compromised immune systems in the birds. Any sign of disease, including a sneeze, can result in a huge number of birds getting sick, and this puts at risk a large amount of profit. So as many experts have stated publicly, the solution to avian flu is in small-scale poultry. So myth number 2, chickens are too noisy. Fact, laying hens at their loudest have about the same decibel level as a human conversation, 60 to 70 decibels. Hens are so quiet that there have been cases of family flocks being kept for years without the next door neighbors even knowing it. To some, noise is a concern with roosters and their credo on heralding, of course. Many urban codes ban roosters, and I would be expecting that we would be looking at doing the same thing as the pilot project indicated. And as it says, the noise level of roosters crow is about the same as a barking dog, so I don't think we need any more barking dogs. So myth number 3, waste and odor. A fact, a 40-pound dog generates more solid waste than 10 chickens. So to be more specific, one 40-pound dog generates about 3/4 pounds of waste every day. 10 chickens generate about 2/3 of a pound, 0.66 pounds of daily food. The advantage to chicken manure is that it can be used as a valuable high nitrogen fertilizer. Unlike dog or cat manure, chicken manure can be combined with yard and leaf waste to create compost. Just as valuable, about 40% of the chicken manure is organic matter, which is necessary for building fertile, healthy topsoil. Chicken manure is so valuable that there is a product called cock-a-doodle-doo. What cock-a-doodle-doo is made of course, is chicken manure. So myth number 4, chicken attracts predators, pests, and rodents. Fact, predators and rodents are already living in urban areas. Wild bird feeders, pet food, gardens, fish ponds, bird baths, trash waiting to be collected all attract raccoons, foxes, rodents, flies. Modern microflock coops such as chicken tractors, arks, and other pens are ways of keeping and managing family flocks that eliminate concerns about predators, rodents, and other pests. So indeed, chickens are part of the solution to pesky problems. Chickens are voracious carnivores. They'll seek and eat just about anything that moves, including ticks, fleas, mosquitoes, grasshoppers, stink bugs, slugs, and even mice, baby rats, and small snakes. So myth number 5, property values will decrease. I know my neighbor's a little bit concerned about this. So fact, there is not one single documented case that we know of about a next-door family flock that has decreased the value of real estate. On the contrary, local foods and of course living green is so fashionable that some realtors and home sellers are offering a free chicken coop with sale. I don't think it's happening on here at the point right now, but it could. So myth number 6, coops are ugly. We've got a couple of images there. Microflock coops designs can be very charming, upscale and even whimsical, of course. Some of them are architecturally designed. You can actually buy them pre-assembled or ready to go, or of course you can build your own. And then myth number 7, of course, what will the neighbors think? So the fact is you can't control what anyone thinks, much less your neighbor. Once folks gain more experiences, and of course that's what we're hoping to do with the pilot project, experiences with the advantages and charms of chickens, most prejudice and fear evaporates, especially when you share some of the fresh, heart-healthy, good-for-you eggs from your flock. There is one huge advantage to family flocks that is often overlooked during chicken debates, and that is the role and value in solid waste management systems. So chickens, as clucking civic workers, are biomass recyclers and can divert tons of organic matter from the trash collection in landfills. Chickens will eat just about all kitchen waste as well. They love people food, even those gone by leftovers and seasoned in the refrigerator. Combine the manure with grass, clippings, fallen leaves, garden waste, and you create amazing compost. And of course, all this can save big-time taxpayer dollars, everyone, which is especially valuable in these times of stressed municipal budgets. There's precedence for employing family flocks as part of trash management. It's even it's being done very successfully in some European towns. One example of the town is Diest in Flanders, Belgium. The city buys laying hens to give residents who want them. The chickens' jobs to divert food waste from the trash stream and not having to be picked up by workers. So kind of cool. I think I made it within my 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions?
Excellent, thank you. Councilor Hopkins.
Thank you, Worship. My question to the delegation is, it's my understanding that you currently have backyard hens, correct?
That may or may not be true.
That last picture there, with those two particular hens, which are very lovely, but I assume that they are yours, yes?
Those are ours.
Okay. I do have to say that, as someone who previously voted in favor, actually twice now, of the particular project, I'm actually very concerned that you would choose to go ahead with it before it was officially approved. Because that was a concern that was around the table, was how would those who would under the project, would they actually follow the rules? And so I would like to hear some sort of explanation for why you chose to do that, because obviously this is a concern, is we can design the rules and the regulations in such a way that it may or not cause problems, but we still have to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And you are responsible for being sort of the example, so I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. So the reason that we went ahead, we didn't have chickens before we applied for the pilot project initially. The reason we ended up going ahead is there is a small buying window for chicks. So you can buy full size chickens year round, but we wanted to raise them from a chick, and there's a small window. The pilot project, had it proceeded, we would have actually missed that window, and we would have literally been sitting without chickens for most of the pilot project term. For those 18 months, we would have been without them for, well, a good 9 or 10 of them. So that was the reason for going ahead and actually building a coop and investing and making this. And yeah, once we had them and things went sideways, it was tough to get rid of them. But I do agree, it's not something that we normally do. We are kind of sticklers for the rules. We had our journal book ready to start, following and making a log and participating.
I will resist the counting your eggs joke, but if this was in fact to be adopted, see, some of you got that. If it was to be changed, we were to allow backyard hens, would you? This is an individual question to you. Would you be willing to pay off the fines that have accrued as a result of having chickens before the program came into place? If we were to move forward, I think it is a question of that sense of responsibility, because I think you recognize that it is an issue, but it's important for us to set a stance.
Yeah, and we're going to adjudication over our funds here shortly. Actually, it's this week, and we'll honor whatever the outcome is. Absolutely.
Councilor Vasilaki.
Thank you, Your Worship. You and I had quite a conversation, actually, a couple of times.
Yes.
Concerning chickens. The only thing that I have against chicken coops and all that in residential areas is that the neighborhood will have no say as to whether they would like to have chickens or hens living next door to them, and for various reasons, whether it was because they have illnesses that will make it worse, or they have allergies, or they have a whole bunch of other variety of stuff that can make their health unbearable in certain cases. Would you be willing to, since you already have chickens, and I wouldn't have asked those personal questions
That's okay.
myself, since you have chickens, would you be willing to put the test in place where your neighbors would have a say as to whether they would like you to have your chickens?
Yeah, I think in most hen keeping, in most municipalities that allow it, getting permission from your neighbors is often part of it. It's not always, but in some municipalities they have adopted that, so you do have to kind of go get permission. I don't know, I could go either way on that. I certainly wouldn't be afraid in my personal situation. I know I've got 2 out of 3 anyway, but yeah, whether, I think that there's enough that we can do and put enough regulation in place, licensing, restrictions so far from property lines and those sorts of things that we can control what's the word, the interference that our neighbors might experience.
Just as long as you're willing to go along with that, there's not much more that I can ask. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Council Conans.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. Thanks for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. One of my, we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's done in a lot of cities, right? You want us to catch up with a lot of the other cities. One city I know that has allowed it is Vancouver. So I went online to information on the web, City of Vancouver's basic chicken care. And they mentioned that the chickens can live as long as a dog or a cat, up to 14 years or longer. But that egg laying generally starts at 6 months and then peaks at 18 months and then dwindles from that time on. So what, I mean, if for example, during the pilot program, I think we were only going to allow four chickens, five, thanks.
Five, yeah.
5 chickens at a time. So after, say, 6, 7 years, they aren't laying anymore. What would you be doing with your chickens?
Well, yeah, first of all, just to be clear, it's not, for those who didn't hear, he said soup. It's not that chickens do stop, so they're accurate and then it does start to dwindle. So they just start losing their consistency. Typically in the peak of most chicken laying eggs, they're gonna lay an egg a day. But yeah, after a couple of years, it will start to dwindle. But a chicken can keep laying for most of its entire life. And you know what most people choose to do? I suspect they'll probably simply keep them. And they'll, you know, whether they can rotate them out. Having 5 eggs every single day is a lot. So, you know, we only have 4 and we have excess. We're giving them away pretty regularly. So I don't see any, what I see people doing is either butchering them or keeping them around until they're past their prime and then slowly replacing them as required. So, but yeah, the reality is animals die. They, you know, chickens, there are different breeds too. It would be breed dependent. So like the birds that we have, they are considered a mixed breed, so good for eggs and for meat. I don't think anyone here is considering raising birds for meat, and I think that was part of the stipulation of the pilot project as well. So it's not that they'd be raised for that, but certainly that's an option.
Thank you. Good answer. That helped. Helped me a little bit there. And then the second question I have is where you talked about butchering. So that was also in our program where you wouldn't be allowed to butcher your chicken. And I asked around and did some research, and there's actually nobody here in town that is allowed to butcher a live animal.
Oh, okay.
Or pluck, or, you know, and so I was wondering
No license
how
established,
you,
yeah.
can you let me know what someone would do in that instance if they need to butcher their chicken?
Well, yeah, whether there's a private individual, I mean, there's lots of hunters in this town, and I know several people that, you know, when they're out hunting duck, for example, they tar and feather that thing before they can get back to their house. But yeah, I guess if you felt comfortable, I don't know, letting it go in the wild, taking it out to the bush, you know, whatever makes sense. I suspect that probably most people will keep their chickens until they're ready to pass, and you know, they'll be disposed of as the same way you would a dog or a cat.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming forward and that very detailed presentation. This item will be considered. This item will be considered on our agenda under number 11. There's a notice of motion coming forward from Councillor Centers, so we'll be looking at it later this meeting.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Next item is item 6.2, the due relocation issue, but before I call Heather forward, Mr. Haddad from our staff has received some new information from the Ministry of the Environment that will be pertinent to the discussion and to the presentation, I suspect. So, Mr. Haddad.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just start with a bit of background in terms of where we have been over the last couple of weeks and summarise the letter from the Ministry that we received on Friday. So as we outlined in the staff report, which was dated 3rd of Feb 2014, staff met with members of the Penticton Indian Band and Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operation to discuss the opportunity to partner in dealing with the urban deer management issue. The approach proposed involved the capture and relocation of urban deer, which involved the trapping of urban deer within the city of Penticton limits, relocation of the deer to the Penticton Indian Band lands, the tagging of the relocated deer, and that it be undertaken as part of a pilot program. In discussion with the Ministry, an application to the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations would be required, and the Ministry staff advised that the permit application would need to outline how the deer would be captured, where the deer would be captured and how many would be captured, how the deer would be transported, where they would be released, and measures to ensure the humane treatment of these animals occurred. The experience of the contractor with regards to capturing and relocating the deer was also required, in addition to support from the Indian Band. Council at its meeting on 17th of Feb 2014 supported this approach with the use of a maximum of $15,000 allocated to this process to set up a pilot program in partnership with the Penticton Indian Band. On Friday, Feb 28th, the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations sent a letter to the City of Penticton citing several concerns and difficulties with the proposed relocation program occurring in the short term, including the need for a community survey to obtain the community input on the proposed process, the need to assess the number of urban deer that exist in the city limits, and also determine an acceptable number of deer based on community feedback to be relocated. The assessment by and consultation with Canadian Food Inspection Agency is also required. The lack of a qualified professional available to undertake a relocation program was also a concern from the Ministry. There are also a limited number of traps available for the capturing and relocation of the deer, as outlined by the Ministry. And the Ministry also highlighted concerns with the location selected for the relocation of the deer. Issues also around what the trapping and relocation process would have on the deer themselves and the surrounding communities needed to be considered as well. The Ministry required that all of these issues and requirements be dealt with prior to any permit being issued, which would take considerable time to undertake. So as a result, and based on the Ministry response, the relocation program will not commence in 2014, or cannot commence without the Ministry's approval. So given the work the Ministry would like to have undertaken beforehand, as I said, will require considerable time. So staff have received this letter from the Ministry, and the opportunity for the delegation is now before Council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haddad. Before I go to the delegation, anyone on council have a comment or a question? Councilor Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor Leckie. I'm wondering about the appropriateness, if you would consider, in light of the information that we just received, a motion I would be prepared to make to abandon the decision of February 7th, and rather to instruct staff to begin the process to find the answers to the information that the Ministry has given us in order to move forward in any manner. So is it appropriate at this point, or do you want to hear the delegation first?
Yeah, I think we should hear from the delegation first, because your motion would preempt any new information that they might want to give us. So we'll go to the delegation, but I think you're already hearing that we have at least one councillor who is prepared to take a position on this issue based on the new information from the Ministry of the Environment. So hopefully that will it may influence what it is you're about to say, but notwithstanding that, I'll invite Ms. Carone forward to discuss the issue. So again, either the lectern or at the desk, whichever you feel most comfortable.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Please come forward, give us your name and address, please.
Honorable Mayor of Penticton.
Your name and address, please, sorry.
Oh, my name is Heather Karen, Unit 3, 3462 South Main Street, Penticton. And I would like to thank the Honorable Mayor and the members of Council for allowing this, because I know you are busy people, and from what I've learned from this, you need to have a tough skin. From everything that I've learned, every day something changes, and I've taken a different stance. I've come to the conclusion that everything I have to say about why you shouldn't relocate them and options have all been discussed before ad nauseum. In Invermere, I'm sure here, and you people have all got laptops and can Google anything you want. So I'm looking at it from a little bit of a different point of view. I think we have a human problem, not a deer problem. And the reason being is that, first of all, the city and the taxpayers are not responsible for individual landowners and them having deer in their backyards. It is their individual responsibility, if they don't want that situation to occur, to deal with it. Fences, plants, and you can come up with any kind of an example to substantiate what I'm saying or not. But that I found interesting. It is not the city's problem. If an individual person wants to buy property in Penticton, they should know that they are living in an environment that has wildlife. And we're talking about deer here, but it isn't just deer. There's other wildlife too, because others are coming in as well. So that's the way in which I would like to look at this. For example, the solution that is being recommended and is being used, culling, relocating, and that sort of thing around the province, isn't going to solve the problem, I believe, because if those 1,000 houses get built up on Upper Narramatta Road, or rather, yes, Narramatta Road, we're moving again into territory where there are going to be deer. What is probably responsible to do for the city is perhaps when people decide to buy, that they are told that, by the way, you are moving into an area that is not Toronto, is not Vancouver, and there is wildlife around, and these are some of the precautions, and there are things that can be done. I mean, these deer are just trying to survive us. We're more of an enemy to them probably than a cougar, because they don't know we're an enemy, and they know a cougar is. So all the things about trauma and imprinting and fawning can all be, all of those reasons for not doing it, you've all heard before, so I'm not going to repeat them. But one of the things that could be done to keep them from fawning in town is some towns successfully use herding dogs and herd them out so that they don't, because they imprint once they fawn in your yard, and there you go, they'll be back. And likewise with this relocation, the flaws in it, it's sort of a knee-jerk reaction, I think, to some people that say, oh my goodness, I've got 7 deer sleeping in my yard. They're sleeping there because they feel safe. You know, or they wouldn't be there. And also, too, we're moving in on them in that way. Lyme disease is not exclusive to deer. The deer tick is a misnomer, really, because all kinds of small rodents and small animals and migratory birds also carry it. But unfortunately, the deer has kind of been branded because of its name. Vehicle accidents. An insurance company in Missouri did a survey to say that the highest incidence of vehicle accidents occurred on the first day of hunting season and the first Saturday of hunting season, because the deer were spooked out of the woods and they ran into the roadways. And they've got statistics to show that. Child, dog, and adults. Well, first of all, some people have, can say, well, I've had more problems with a dog and a car than I have with a deer. Everyone's got a different experience, so I don't want to go there. But the RCMP, having talked to them, are more concerned with children darting out between parked cars, and there's been no actual documented incident of a child being injured. I think a lot of this is a what-if kind of concern. We as humans, being the problem, I believe, need to know that, first of all, if the deer don't fawn in town anymore, there's not going to be that concern about the aggressive female standing up when he sees you coming and trying to defend. We need to give them a wide berth, perhaps bylaws, where dogs are kept on leashes. I've been knocked over by a dog. Education when it comes to driving. Reflectors on highways where I know that there are some pictures on the roadways of deer crossing, but not a whole lot. People need to know that they're not on a freeway in Toronto or any other big city in the United States, and that they need to drive in a certain way in areas where there are wildlife. And that can reduce any incidents. But which, by the way, having done some research, couldn't find anything with ICBC or RCMP where they documented actual deer collisions. I'm not saying they have not happened, okay? But they had everything else documented, but I didn't see that. So with some of those concerns, some of the solutions, other than what council is suggesting and what other communities have done in the Okanagan, culling for one. There's herding dogs, there's education. There's a gentleman here with our delegation who's got 160 acres of land, which he's written into the Penticton Western. Dave Chaplin, could you stand up? Right here. And I also heard that apparently part of his land is private and part of his land is surrounded by federal lands, and it's unfenced. So he has offered his land if relocation were going to happen. Someone said to me, well, the argument you'll get is that you'll be told that the deer belong to the people of BC and therefore they cannot be put on private land. However, if they're taken to some other place, they're going to get possibly shot anyway, or in the trauma of relocation, nasty things could still happen to them. So there's that option sitting right here in our room. There's bylaws and education. And being a school teacher, I'd be more than willing to get involved in some of the education programs. Deer don't realize that a highway or a roadway is a risk, like we do. It's open, it's easy to cross, they can see their predators, and there's food in the springtime along the edge. So they don't know that, gee, I should stay away from that. And those are the kinds of educational things, and there is some defensive driving as well, that when I talk about education, that, you know, the population needs to know about. They probably don't know that a lot of things that I learned myself coming from a big city. And the fourth and final thing, which is, I know is very controversial, but it works, is the contraception. Dr. J. Fitzpatrick in Montana has been utilizing it. There's lots of information, if you Google it on the internet, that shows his successes and the various pitfalls and the various state where that is at the moment. And that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Council now. Any questions or comments? Council Hoffman, Council Collins.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Ms. Karen, I have to say I appreciated the presentation that you gave and how you chose to focus on what you chose to focus on.
Thank
We have
you.
heard a lot of these arguments before. I have two questions. One is more specific and one is more abstract. So the first question is with regards to the contraceptive issue, because this has come up and I've had conversations with you about this, is were you, and I'm sure you've done some research on it, but were you aware that none of the, I think there were 3 contraceptive vaccines, were you aware that none of them were actually licensed yet in Canada?
Aha. But you know what, the licensing part, well, let's put approved, I can speak to approved as opposed to licensing. I don't know if they're synonymous. What Fitzpatrick said was that when a drug comes out, and this even happens with cancer drugs for human beings, is that they are deemed, if they are experimental or if they're not approved, what it means is you or I can't go and buy it over the counter or get a prescription to buy it that way. They can only be used in controlled experimental situations through universities, through wildlife associations where they are being controlled and experts are using them. And that's what that means. And then when they use the term experimental, it tends to scare people because people think, well, my goodness, that's not. So I don't know if licensing means the same thing as experimental or not.
Yeah, my understanding is that it would be in that experimental sense is how it would be first be able to approve, which would obviously require some bureaucracy with regards to licensing.
Right, and maybe if that is a roadblock, maybe it's worth investigating to find out, well, like why? Because he's had a lot of success. Now, mind you, he talks about islands and small communities and flat areas to dart the deer. Because it's time consuming, but the numbers, $240, even if it's more expensive than the States, they were quoting $66 per deer. That's still a little bit less than relocating them. And on a relocation, even if you're gonna say, oh, we're gonna use the meat, well, if the deer are stressed in the transfer, stress hormones taint the meat, and it tastes terrible, and there's other things too. But that was one thing I noticed. I learned a lot doing this. And I know, too, also from a point of view of tourism, real estate people promote this area. You know, well, there's deer around. Also too, people deer watch. I know my daughter and I, when we moved here, we still do it. We drive up on the residential areas looking for deer eating your trees. Just because in Toronto, all you see are roadkill, squirrels or something on the road, right? Nothing exciting. And I had only ever seen a deer in the zoo. So there's that. We don't have a water park anymore. We don't have the petting zoo, as I think it's in Caledon. All these things that we're losing, the climate we can't control, but it was lousy last summer. Lots of reasons for young families not to come back to Penticton, and I've been reading, you know, we're worried about the economy of this city, and I have seen it, only being here 3.5 years from an amateur's point of view, decline. So.
Oh, okay, that answers the first question I had. The second question I wanted to ask, and if you bear with me, it's a bit of an abstract sort of hypothetical, is, and I understand you made the argument that we have a human problem, we need to promote defensive driving, etc., etc. I agree that there is some element of human agency involved. We have to be responsible for ourselves. But I do look at this from the perspective not of people complaining about deer eating of tulips. I look at it at the perspective of deer, for whatever reason, being on a road on a dark night during the winter time, and someone comes around the corner, even at the posted speed limit, and has some distraction in the car and they can't quite pay attention. And as much as we can try and do our best to educate people and tell them to be responsible, there's always going to be that sort of human error. And
Of course.
So my question to you is, in that situation, do you think, how would you decide that situation if we could take some step, however sensitive it may be, to help protect and reduce the impact of that human error? How do you sort of square the...
Well, first of all, you're talking about human error. It could be a child, it could be another vehicle, it could be anything. And I think you probably can't. And I guess my tack on the relocation as to the chosen spot and the culling, from everything that I've read, it doesn't solve the problem long term. And even your most humane biologist says, you know, this is a management problem. This is a management, I won't call it a problem because I don't see it as that, issue that is going to be ongoing forever. And you've got some lady calling, you know, I've used a cane too because I have 2 artificial hips, calling, living alone, saying I've got, you know, 7 deer sleeping in my backyard and scared and doesn't know what to do. Okay, fine, fence your yard. I still say that's their problem, and it's legally, I don't think the city is liable. And we as taxpayers, you know, I don't mind. I'll take $240 out of my pocket to pay for a deer to be darted if it doesn't going to produce any young and it's going to help the situation. But I really don't think this is going to work long term, regardless of whether or not I like nature or not.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question concerning, I just wanted to get to understand, do you not want to do any type of relocation? Because I noticed you brought along a gentleman who's, thank you for offering the land,
I was waiting for you to ask that.
Appreciate
No,
that.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that, well, Brian Harris from the ministry, and people have got different views on the success of relocation. And I think you've mentioned it yourself, you know, how the injured, the trauma, the whatever can occur here. I would suggest to you that the Penticton Indian Band is not to take 15 or 30 deer. It's not going to, I don't think that's going to solve the problem. I think they're still going to fill up the gaps in Penticton, and it's going to be an ongoing issue. Secondly, there's no food. If it's Marin Valley, the horses are starving. You know, I think it's just a bad idea, and I don't have proof of this, but I have a strong feeling that from what I've heard from anecdotal reports, they're going to be shot. You know, they're not going to have much of a chance. Now, I know people have hunted forever, but the hunter's code is at least, you know, the animal gets a running chance. And I don't think that's going to happen here. Relocation on this gentleman's property, he's offering trailers that are safe for transporting animals, large animals. I do believe, would you like to say something about that?
I don't have any
Well, if you don't mind, ma'am, we'll give the gentleman an opportunity to come to the microphone when you're done, but if you wouldn't mind just answering.
Sorry, I guess
Sorry,
my
did you say come
question,
to the microphone or
No.
no?
not now.
Not now? Okay, that's
I
fine.
guess, so just to make it clear,
So
you are not opposed to relocation?
No, I'm not opposed to relocation as long as it's done differently than what has been suggested, no. Like something like this, or, yeah.
Any other questions from council? Okay, well, that is the end of your 5 minutes.
That's it? Oh, yeah, I'm
Thank you-
done.
Thank you very much for coming forward.
I timed it this afternoon and I was right to the second, so
Okay, thank you very
thank
much.
you very much.
We'll move on now to the regular part of the agenda, the reconsideration of bylaws and permits. So first of all will be the motion that was the subject of the public hearing earlier this evening, zoning amendment bylaw 20. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. I need to recognize first of all Councillor Sentis. She was.
Thank you, Mayor Lickey. In light of the information that has been accumulated, that being from the ministry itself, from the delegation this evening, I would like to move that the council abandon the motion that was put forward, I believe at the February 7th meeting. And I will leave it at that. I will just move that we abandon that initiative.
This is moved and seconded that Councillor abandon. Any discussion on that motion? And if you wouldn't mind, please, Gallery, I appreciate your applause, but let's try to keep the tone fairly serious here. Hate to say that, given the subject matter, and I do appreciate your appreciation of the presenters, but let's try to keep it down. So we have a motion on the floor, and Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. So here's the problem that I have with the motion. While I can agree that given in light of what we've heard from the province and just general concern that that particular project may not be suitable, I still think we are essentially choosing to leave this question undecided. And I think one way or another we have to decide whether or not we can. And as much as I am persuaded by the presentation by Mrs. Karen and others who have spoken on this issue, I still can't help but feel obligated that we have to take some action because there's no way to remove the human error which could lead to a safety problem. And as much as you can educate folks, as much as you can do your best to reduce the harm of the situation, you have, I think, at some point in time, you have to decide, are we going to give the benefit of the doubt to those who are driving the car and might have this hazard come up against them, or preference sort of the rights of the deer? And they do have some rights, but I think we have to balance it.
If you don't mind, please, Councillor Hopkins has the floor.
Can we unelect? So my concern is we have to do it in a humane and suitable way, but I don't necessarily think that we can just say that the mother of kids driving home from hockey practice on a weekday night and it's deer, it's her fault. And
So what?
that we have no ability to help protect from that situation. That for me is an issue that I think needs to be dealt with. I simply refuse to say that I'm sorry, it's your fault that you hit a deer and that you may have caused harm to your family and obviously caused harm to the deer as well. I cannot say that I cannot reconcile that. So if we choose to simply abandon and do nothing, I don't know if I can necessarily support that, but I would look for something in which we can deal with this in a humane and responsible way. I don't know. I still think.
Okay, so the motion is to abandon the previous direction to provide a pilot project. And before I go to Councillor Vasilaki and Sentis, I will ask that everyone give due respect to what might be contrary opinions. We engage in fairly healthy debate around this table. We often disagree with each other, but we always do allow each other to have the floor and to complete their expression of their opinion before any further interruption. So I'll ask you to pay that same courtesy to the people who are speaking. Thank you. Councillor Vasilaki.
Thank you, Your Worship. I seconded the motion because even last time I voted against spending the $15,000 to take the deer over to the Indian band. I've lived in this community for 60 years, and the situation hasn't changed in 60 years. It's the same as it was back in the 50s, but when we first moved here. There were always deer on the road. There were always people hitting deer. There were always mishaps on properties with deer that were protecting their young, just like any human mother would protect its young or her young. The deer or the animals do exactly the same thing. I've hit a deer coming down from from West Side to Peachland, and it wasn't the deer's fault. It was the road conditions. And in most cases, it's road conditions or speeding that causes those accidents on highways. I fell into that trap because of snow on the ground. You put your brake on when you see a deer and you just glue right onto it. And I had $5,000 damage done to my car. Fortunately, none of us got hurt, neither did a deer. For people to say that the deer are at fault or they don't have any rights, I don't believe that at all. If other animals, because we're an animal as well, if they don't have rights, how do we expect us to have rights? I'm always of the opinion that you've got to respect everything around us. Even though we're humans and they're animals, they have just the same rights as we do, and we should respect those rights. And we should also be very, very careful as to what we do in our everyday life and how we drive and all the other stuff that goes along with it. I love deer. I've got no problem with it. They live in my yard 12 months a year. I live on the lake, and they come in and sit there. They go down to the lake and drink water. One of them got stuck out into my wharf the other day. It took me hours to scare it out of there. But I did it. The water was freezing cold. Okay, but it got out of there. And I saw it jump and run off and have a good time up the hill. There's nothing wrong with that. We just have to respect nature, just like we expect nature to respect us. That's all.
Councilor Spencer, and Jackie Bye.
Thank you again, Mayor Lidgate. I put the motion forward because I don't agree with this as a resolution. Like my colleague here, I'm not so sure we have a problem, and I appreciated your comments, Ms. Karen, because it's all in perception, isn't it, as to what is a problem. And there have been fears expressed, but we have no documentation that support those fears. So my motion is that I do not feel, my motion to abandon this initiative is because I don't feel it's appropriate. I don't see it as even being successful. And as I will say again, I'm not so sure what the problem is. So my motion is simply that if in fact we follow the directives from the ministry that says, if you are concerned that there may be a problem, there are steps you have to take. There has to be appropriate data, accumulated data, not once or twice, but accumulated data. And then I think you have to consider what the options are. Again, if there is a problem that arises. So my motion is to abandon this particular initiative, and that's the way that it is. And if at any time council is apprised of issues, we'll deal with it at that point.
Councilor Clements.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that basically we just saved $15,000. I also read in the paper that they were going to be sent over to be hunted, and I have nothing against hunting, but for $1,000 a deer, I don't think that was appropriate. So we need to move on. I'm actually extremely tired of the amount of time and feel bad for the amount of time that our staff has been spending on this, and when we have much more important things to do in this city. So what I think that we should do next is, I agree with Councillor Sentis' motion. I think next what we need to do is we need to follow a different plan, one that doesn't take so much time off of our staff. I received information this past week from the SPCA that they have a 3 to 5 year plan that they would like to follow that would be humane and would follow step by step, because it's taking a long time anyway, and the ministry is completely tying our hands with anything we try to do. So instead of waiting for that, why don't we let the SPCA work for us, work with us, and help us set up a plan that is humane and that the people can rally behind.
Councillor Jacobite.
So I sort of have some difficulty with this in the respect of the motion is to abandon as if there's no problem whatsoever and let's not talk about it ever again. And that's not quite my opinion. I still think there is an issue. I've had lots of people saying, at least you're doing something. There's been debate on whether this proposal was the right one. And I mean, I voted moving forward to get more information because I too thought the sticker price of $1,000 per animal was very excessive, and if it would have come back to us saying we found 2 trappers or 2 qualified people that can do it, and they're it's going to be still cost $1,000. Well, I probably wouldn't go forward on it. Having said that, I still think there's an issue. We've been making a lot of talk about the interaction between a car and deer. I'm more concerned about the human interaction. People who to some degree feel captive in the yards, but more importantly, when they're out walking by themselves or with their pets or whatever, getting very intimidated and sometimes traumatized by that confrontation with the deer. So I still think there's a problem, and to say let's just wash our hands of it, especially when we're so for it before, and now we have a packed house, all of a sudden it's, well, wait a second here, now I'm getting cold feet on it. I mean, that's a bad way of putting it, but I think it's something we still need to address, and no matter what we do, there's going to be people in the crowd and people in the community that say, that's too harsh, that's not harsh enough, that's not good enough, that's a good thing you're doing this, or a bad thing you're doing that. So I don't think it's a situation where we can win no matter what we're doing, but I still think it's something we need to address down the road and completely abandon and say, there's no problem, I still have issues with that.
Councillor Vasilaki.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some of us didn't change our mind because there's a full house. Some of us were against it from day one. And like Councillor Goldman says, it's that $15,000. That raised a big issue with me, not just transporting a deer and having them killed over on the native lands. That's not it at all. Like somebody said a few months ago, every council has the right to change their mind. You know, the big issue that I did. You know, so not all of us change our votes because there's a lot of people who do. I didn't. I was against it from day one. Thank you.
Councillor Sentis.
Thank you again, Mayor Leckie. I thought I made myself clear, but maybe I didn't, and I'm a teacher too, so I don't know, I'll try again. I didn't say that there was a washing of our hands, so I'm a little taken aback by that. What I said was I don't approve of this motion, I don't approve of this action. We still have a bylaw on the books against feeding, and I would encourage that if that is happening in the community, it be reported, that council staff can deal with it appropriately. We continue with our education program, and I'm a dog too, and I have an unfenced yard, and I have deer in my yard, and I have a love-hate relationship with that. So I try not to plant stuff in my yard that they will like, that I still will like. So I didn't say I'm washing my hands. I said I don't approve of this particular action. And I do think we need to continue our efforts of education. I think we definitely need to stand behind our bylaws. We gave the bylaw teeth. I think we need to make sure that that moves forward. And at such time as there is more needed from us, then this council will do what is necessary at that time. So that, just so that I hope I made myself clear. Thank you for the opportunity.
Councillor Hopper.
Thank you. Yeah, my understanding, that was clear, but that clearly says that we're just gonna stick with the status quo. We will do nothing more than what we've already approved. And I'm not entirely sure that that's quite good enough to address the concerns that we have received. That there are as many people as there are in this room, there are just as many on the other side, as Councilor Jackson said. And I still come back to the situation where, let's say that Councilor Vasilaki, God forbid, had to get that deer and someone comes down and be the result of that. Are we to say that we would not take an action that we thought could still prevent that injury, even though the risks of that are obviously low, but so are the risks of children sometimes jumping out in front of the crosswalk, or bikers sometimes getting hit by a car on the road, yet we still take preventative action to make sure that we stop those situations from happening. And yes, sometimes it costs money, but we realize that there are sometimes we have to do our best to try and save us from ourselves, to try and prevent the cost and harms of human error. And so I still don't think I've heard an answer from those who want to abandon it, what they would do in that situation. What do you think it's acceptable that some people, we may be allowing and exposing some people to the harm that is, yes, inevitable because of human error, but some sense that we can help reduce that harm? You're simply unwilling to take that step, or you don't think this would reduce it? I just would like to hear a response from those who don't want to abandon this or take any, don't want to take any action. They would just simply say, sorry, too bad, Councilor Vasilaki, if one of your family members had died.
No one's gonna say that.
With all due respect, Councilor Hopkins, I'm going to interject because I would like to call the question fairly soon. I mean, it's not really the responsibility of government to protect every individual from every harm and from every risk that they might encounter in their lives. So we don't really have that capability, and we have to expect individuals to take some responsibility for their own safety and to mitigate the risks and the hazards they find in their own front yard, whatever they might be.
Yeah.
So unless there's any further germane comment, I'd like to call the question on this. Councilor Jackley, right?
Yes, just quickly, and on my only other point is, we really haven't explored all our options before we say let's abandon. I made my point earlier about we still don't know what the cost would be for relocation. We have an estimate from the ministry. Clearly, the ministry is throwing a lot more red tape in front of us and hoops to cross to even get to a point where they might even consider this, and at the end of the day, they're the ones that sign off on this happening or not happening. We heard a little bit more of some other options from the presentation, and contraceptive. There's before we even got to this meeting, there was another gentleman who came here about a larger deer fence. The presentation was even supportive of relocation to another location, but again, we still don't know what that might cost, if that was even a feasible thing. So just to abandon ourselves without all that information of what the other options may or may not be, I think is we're rushing our decision without all the proper information.
Okay, so then as the final speaker to this motion, I will support the motion, even though I helped to initiate this pilot program in the first instance. It was in response to well over 200 complaints that we had from members of the community who were complaining about the presence of urban deer and perceived risks and the hazards and so on. We made every attempt that we could. We explored all of the alternatives. This seemed to be a viable alternative. We had the cooperation of the Penticton Indian Band, and I thought we had the cooperation of the Ministry of the Environment. We sat in a meeting with the Ministry of the Environment and the Penticton Indian Band and the city staff, and everyone seemed to be in agreement that this was a feasible way of dealing with the problem. It was somewhat shocking last Friday afternoon to receive the new communication from the Ministry of the Environment creating a whole bunch of new obstacles for this. So you've already heard about the amount of time that's been spent on this, the amount of staff resources. You've heard about concerns about the price tag on this issue. And so I think it is appropriate then for us to say to the community and to the 200 people who complained, we tried everything that was within our jurisdiction and within our power and within our budget to solve this problem. There just seem to be too many impediments and too many obstacles to actually resolving the problem. So it is now going to go back to the individual to deal with the situation in their own yards and their own front yards, whether that means fencing or getting a dog or whatever it is. But the problem, unfortunately, has to revert back to the individual because this municipality, and along with the municipalities in the Kootenays and on the island, I've been in conversation with other mayors who are experiencing similar difficulties and experiencing similar frustrations. Not able to really find a viable solution to the identified problem, and so I'm going to support this motion that we abandon, and that means that it'll go back to the individuals in their own yards to take care of the problem that they, if they see the problem. Not everybody sees it as a problem, as you've heard. So those who see it as a problem, I guess it's going to be up to them to deal with it. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor of abandoning, opposed? Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Jacobite opposed, so the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to correspondence. We have correspondence from the Communities in Bloom and invitation to. I'm sorry. Thank you. And I'm needing some help here. I skipped over an agenda item. Item number 7, reconsideration of bylaws and permits. This was the subject of the public hearing earlier this evening, zoning amendment bylaw 2014-11. That was with respect to the 3480 Squaw Lake Road. I'm looking for a motion for second, third, and adoption. Councilor Vasilaki, moved and seconded. Any discussion on this motion? Councilor Sanders.
If I may just make the comment, council has received a couple of letters in support of this that have been very encouraging of the developers' attitude and strategies that have been encountered. So I just wanted to appreciate the fact that some people took time to comment.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Sanders, for noting that quite often applications of this nature meet only with opposition. So it's quite encouraging to hear from members of the neighborhood or in support of moving forward in their neighborhood. So with that, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the correspondence. The Communities in Bloom invitation to participate. Looking for a motion to receive that invitation. Moved. Any discussion on that? Call the question. All those in favor? That letter is received. A letter from the Skeena Queen Charlotte Regional District regarding the BC ferry service cuts. A motion to receive that letter. Moved. Seconded. Any discussion around that? Call the question. All those in favor? That letter is received. Item 9.3, a grant request from Apex. Councilor Conans.
Sure, I'll explain. I just received this just over the weekend, or some information about this. It's a grant request, and it's late in the season, but it's for something pretty exciting. It's actually from the Apex Freestyle Club Society. So what it is let me see my notes here. So the prestigious Canadian National Freestyle Skiing Championships is coming to Penticton and Apex March 26th to the 30th. There's going to be over 200 competitors from around the country, and they're going to be with their coaches, their families, and then officials from around the country also, and sponsors. They'll all be descending on Penticton and Apex. So one of the sponsors of this incredible event is Air Canada. So we're trying to promote, or actually what the Apex Freestyle Club Society is trying to promote, is to have people fly to this event into the Penticton Airport. So in order to do that, what they'd like to do is they'd like to send to each competitor through their associations, through their provincial associations, a luggage tag with the Penticton Airport on it, name on it, and also a toque advertising Penticton and the area. So it's really